Welcome to the Burnout Recovery Podcast, a guiding resource dedicated to healthcare professionals on their journey to overcoming burnout. Spearheaded by Dr. Joe Braid, a certified professional coach and rehabilitation physician.
You are listening to the Burnout Recovery Podcast. I'm Dr. Joe Braid, and today we're exploring something deeply personal that I believe will resonate with many of you. So there's a beautiful trend of reflecting back and sharing wisdom with our younger selves. And as a coach who helps others transform their lives, I've learned that sometimes the most powerful insights come from these moments of reflection. Today, I'm opening up about my own journey, not just as a professional, but as someone who's walked the path of personal growth and transformation. So I'm going to ad-lib with my answers in this podcast episode today. And first of all, I'll share with you the pivotal moment. And the specific age that I would revisit was in my late 30s in 2017, with 3 boys under 6 years, when I chose to open my private medical clinic here in Orange. I'd been upskilling in integrative medicine, a really wide area of medicine, in a way a lot broader than rehabilitation medicine, and I wanted to bring this clinic to Orange. There were a few practitioners out here, and I benefited a lot from this kind of approach to health. And so I was studying, I was opening clinic, I was seeing new clients, I was engaging a wonderful health coach. I was fitting everything in around the demands of the kids. So I had one child in kindergarten and the other 2 were smaller, and I was already exhausted generally from having my 3 kids, with 5 years of nursing my kids, 5 years at least of broken sleep. I'm sure this can relate to you. I remember going across the country to Perth to a conference with friends, assisting with my little one to bring him in for breastfeeds in between the sessions at the conference. I had a pretty small network. I was not very happy to ask for help. And I really used my pre-children approach of, you can do it all, Joe. You know, if we think about that hidden curriculum in medicine, I've referred to that before. That's what we pick up often in the medical student years when we start going into hospital, and we learn from the junior doctors. Well, this is what I learned in the UK, and I still think it does happen here as well, that you just get on with it. Don't ask for help. Do it all. Try not to have anything to hand over. Try and finish all your task list before you go off shift, whenever that might be. And the funny thing was, I was my own boss in this scenario. I worked in a public hospital, very part-time. I'd set up my own private clinic, so I was my own boss. So if anybody was, tapping me on the shoulder or saying, you should be doing this better, it was me. So let's connect the dots between then and now. In 2020, I reached out for group coaching with Dr. Katrina Ubell, who is a doctor and also a coach. And I really felt like this space was a safe space for me, with a sense of trust, a sense of acceptance, belonging, and I guess that understanding of, we've done the whole medical degree, medical career thing as well. And there was something that was really relatable and a great start, with a significant investment that I took to see if both the tangible and the intangible outcomes that were suggested would really come through. It was such a good journey. In the 12 months I worked with Katrina and her team, I really felt heard. And I built my own little toolbox that I could use wherever I was, whether that was with family or whether that was in the workplace or traveling. I remember one holiday with my family, and my husband and I were sitting out, and we were by the beach and having a chat. And he said, "Do you really need to do work in the evenings?" And I really heard him and questioned that and thought, maybe I don't need to do work in the evenings. And it was so hard to wrangle with at first. And I thought, really, can this possibly happen? Are there enough hours in the day? Are there enough hours in the week? And when I decided to not do any additional work in the evening, it almost became a bit more efficient, because that was no longer a time block where I could do some work. And albeit it wasn't necessarily the most efficient work, it was at the end of the day, I am much more of a morning person than a night person. And just releasing that was such a relief and such a lightening for me. So this moment of having coaching, realizing that things were really not going that well. I didn't really realize that myself. In burnout, sometimes we don't really realize we are in burnout. That exposure to coaching at a different stage in my life, so once I had 3 kids, as opposed to performance coaching I had to do my rehabilitation specialist exams. I also had coaching before my first son was born. I think tapping in again to coaching at that later phase when I did have 3 kids was so helpful. And I ended up identifying some of those burnout symptoms I didn't realize I had. And I really changed my approach to life and the satisfaction that I felt. So my key insight around burnout and burnout recovery is it takes time. Going into burnout doesn't happen overnight, and likewise coming out of burnout doesn't happen overnight. And once I realized that this was going to take time, and throwing more at it or going harder at it didn't really make it clear up any more quickly. My time that I really made this realization was in 2021. So we're in the thick of COVID. I had to apply to the Australian government to get a leave pass to travel back to the UK on an aeroplane with about 6 people on it to go and care for my mum, who had unfortunately been diagnosed with cancer that year. And my father had passed the year before in 2020. I hadn't got back home at all for Dad's final weeks or for his funeral, which was, very upsetting. And then to have Mum with cancer, I really needed to get over to the UK and assist her. She was bouncing in and out of hospital and didn't have anybody really nearby to look after her because of the restrictions they had in the UK. So I stopped my clinic for 6 weeks. I had 4 weeks in the UK and, of course, those bonus 2 weeks in hotel quarantine. It was a great time to evaluate, to reflect, and I was getting coached also during this time. That's what I love about this space, is with virtual coaching that can continue despite time changes and so forth. I really made a clear decision with that space to think and pause and have another brain working on my challenge. I made the decision and a time frame to exit my clinic. And I also made a decision to really learn the coaching tools in the toolbox. So I could use them, but I didn't really know how they worked. And I've always been a person that likes to know how something works. So how this relates to working with clients now, I guess clients often come to me for coaching when they have got a break off work and they really want to feel ready to re-enter the workforce and not go into the same spiral of going into burnout again. So they want to recover from burnout and have those protective factors so that they don't re-enter burnout. And how I often start with clients is starting small with manageable goals that get repeated often, or tools that get repeatedly used. So you grow that confidence and that familiarity and that almost automatic use of tools that are really helpful for burnout recovery. And if you fall over, learning how to get back up again and being a human in this journey of life. We've seen this in children, in toddlers, in kids that are learning to walk. They fall over and they learn how to get up and try again. And also asking for help, both within the home and also within the workplace. And that's just a handful of some of the lessons that I guess I learned and I use with clients in their extensive burnout recovery journeys. And this lesson finally stuck for me when, I had that really deep human connection time with Mum. It was such a special time together, like 4 weeks together, and my kids weren't with me, and that time to support Mum and fill her fridge and, make sure she had some time and space for movement, but also to nurture her and look after her was such a special time. Work was not the priority then. And really, I guess I had that evaluation that work never is the priority for me now. Keeping myself well, both physically and emotionally, is the essential factor for everything else to keep rolling on. So now I want to share with you some of my practices that now really seem obvious. So I talked before about working in the evenings, and I would go to bed at like 10, 11 p.m. That sort of idea of, when everybody else is quiet, then I'll get my time then, and it feels wonderfully indulgent. And you know what? I'd love to have an extra hour, not just 1 hour. My sleep is so different now, lights off by about 9:30 every evening. And then I usually wake up before 6:30 most mornings, feel like filled with good quality sleep. And that is one of my really big foundations that doesn't change much through any of the nights of the week. Morning journaling with my coffee, absolutely love doing that. I've talked about that before, and that's that space to write down thoughts that I notice are going on in my head. So that's a bit of a self-coaching practice as well. I have weekly coaching with my coach, which I really enjoy. I have much firmer personal boundaries than I ever used to have before. And so that gives myself that permission to say no to something with that certainty and that confidence behind it. Also, dropping my inner critic, who had such a strong muscle and was so well refined from, I guess, I started my medical career in 1997, and it was 2017 that I opened my clinic, and it was about 2021 that I made all these changes. That's quite a long time for my inner critic to keep working well and keep refining their skills. My inner critic is way quieter now, and I have got permission to slip up. I've got an example just from last weekend. It was my turn to take my son to cricket, which was over an hour and a half away on a Sunday. We had to arrive at 9 a.m. I didn't set an alarm because, as I said, I always get up before 7 a.m. I slept in till 7:45, which automatically made us late for the warm-up. And, we had a bit of time on the journey to defrag around this. But I just sort of thought, look, it's not the end of the world. We're slightly late. We're getting there before the game starts, and he can do warm-ups with his friends once he's there. And it was so much easier than the turmoil and the angst I could have felt around not setting an alarm on Sunday. And boy, did I need that sleep, I guess. One more point is actually last September, I quit alcohol. I've never been a particularly high drinker or a high-level drinker in the last few years since I've had my kids, but completely going off alcohol, I feel so much better. I don't think it relates to burnout necessarily. It does relate if it's something that you use as a coping tool, but that's not how I was using it. And asking for help is another real game-changing habit that I am so much happier to do. So I really had resistance at first to changing up the evenings so that I wouldn't be working in the evenings. That was that inner critic and that perfectionist approach of, you're never going to get everything done. You need to spend extra time. It's never going to be good enough. Changing these habits that I've just listed above just means the journey is so much better. I really have a sense of longevity in what I'm doing now, and I don't really feel a rush to get anywhere. So it's a much easier journey than it really felt like before. And yeah, I mean, I'm talking about still practicing clinical medicine, still being a mom, a wife, amateur tennis player, also a coach, marketing my business, also recording podcasts like this one every week and uploading them so you guys can find them wherever you look for your podcasts. there's a few different moving parts as well as speaking gigs that are coming up and so forth. But it's all so much more manageable than it ever used to feel like before, and it's really enjoyable as well. Got 2 more sections that I'm going to go through. The key relationships I overlooked before. Firstly, the relationship with myself. I've talked about that, about my inner critic. Secondly, bringing my husband in to discuss my business challenges. I felt like I was doing different kind of work to him. He does surgery. I was doing functional medicine. I'm now doing coaching. And he has been great as a sounding board and to discuss this further, really knowing the whole family situation and our goals as a family going forwards. I've got a great network of women colleagues in the Central West and have felt very supported, particularly in my coaching business since opening that in 2021. One of my podcast guests last year was Sharon Luttrell, and she is my peer coach. We finished our coach training together in 2021, and we continue to catch up once a week. And that is such a great supportive relationship both ways. And I'm also in groups of doctors who are coaches as well. And that's been fantastic to have those relationships of people that have changed from doing purely clinical work to clinical and sort of entrepreneurial work. I guess I didn't see the value in all of this earlier because I felt like it was that weakness in asking for help. And I just can't rate any of it highly enough. It's been such a change, and it's such a pleasure to have the time, to make the time, to find the time to connect with all of these different people who just do support me ongoing. And I guess it really has invited me to connect with others now as a sort of leader in the field of burnout recovery. Very grateful for the connections that I've been invited to make through my broader network. I aim to be providing support for others, especially through this free resource with my podcast. And yeah, it's a great way to connect with lots of other people who I don't think I might have ever met in my lifetime otherwise. So rounding this out, my most meaningful self-taught lesson is there is no rush. The struggle I had before was to go fast, go hard, don't stop. And the solution I now have is pause, breathe, take a break, maybe move your body, ask for help, and give it some time. And this really influences how I work with others to, as I've said already on the podcast, to set those manageable goals, get really clear on what that next step is. So you're making the decision so you know for your brain what is the next step to take. And having an overarching vision, I love that. I do have that, but it's not giant steps to take. And also I'm very guided by my values that I have, which are integrity, fun, and growth. And they come into my business and into my personal life as well. So I hope you've picked up some of the points that I would share with my former self. And I can see that, you know, some of the struggle might not have been so hard if I had known back then what I guess I know now. We all have these lives, and there are these points of like breaking and struggle and then break through, and that makes us who we are going forwards. And as I share these reflections with you today, I'm struck by how our journeys, though unique, often share common threads. You'll hear that in many of my podcast guests that I've had and still have booked and planned to come onto the podcast. Whether you're in the midst of your own transformation or supporting others through theirs, remember that every challenge you're facing is shaping who you're becoming. So I'd love to hear from you what messages you would share with your younger self. Connect with me on Instagram at Burnout Recovery Doctor, or visit my website, drjobraid.com, to continue this conversation. Sometimes the wisdom we need most is already within us, waiting to be discovered through reflection and gentle self-awareness. And until next time, remember that your future self is cheering you on, just as I'm here supporting you now. Thanks for listening to this episode. Schedule a free discovery call if you want to learn how I can help you. Dive right in with my 60-minute burnout strategy session, or experience Program Vitality, my tailored one-on-one burnout recovery program. All information is available at drjobraid.com with links in the show notes.